I married a woman 8 years older than me, and everyone said it would never work. Ryan Parker never planned to fall in love again. As a 34-year-old single father drowning in spreadsheets and daycare schedules, romance wasn't even on his radar. Then Lena Brooks walked into his life, confident, kind, and completely off limits in his mind. Not because she wasn't interested, but because she was 42, divorced, and convinced their age gap would destroy any chance they had. This is the story of how a broken coffee machine led to the most honest relationship of his life. If you want to see how this unfolds, stay until the end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Ryan Parker had stopped believing in perfect moments somewhere between his divorce papers and his daughter's third tantrum that week. It was a Thursday afternoon in March, the kind of day that felt gray even when the sun was out. Ryan stood in the break room of the Mercer Building, a forgettable mid-rise in downtown Seattle, staring at an espresso machine that had clearly given up on life. The digital display blinked Error 03 like a taunt. He'd already pressed every button twice. Nothing. He needed this coffee. Not wanted, needed. His day had started at 5:47 a.m. when his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, woke him by poking his cheek and whispering, "Daddy, I think I forgot to do my homework." She hadn't forgotten. She'd simply decided last night that drawing horses was more important than math worksheets, a position Ryan couldn't entirely argue against but also couldn't defend to her teacher. So he'd helped her rush through multiplication tables while burning toast, hustled her into the car with mismatched socks, and arrived at drop-off just as the bell rang. Then he'd sat in traffic for 40 minutes, answered 17 emails before even reaching his desk, and sat through a budget meeting where his boss used the phrase synergistic optimization, without irony. Now it was 2:30 p.m., and Ryan's soul felt like it had been run through a commercial dishwasher. He jabbed the espresso machine's power button one more time. Nothing. "Come on," he muttered. "Just work with me here." The machine blinked Error 03 again, smug and indifferent. Ryan sighed and leaned his forehead against the cabinet above the machine, closing his eyes. This was his life now, begging appliances for basic cooperation. "You look like you're trying to reason with it." The voice came from behind him, calm, warm, faintly amused. Ryan turned, and there she was. Lena Brooks stood in the doorway of the break room, holding a tablet against her hip and wearing a look of bemused sympathy. She was tall, taller than Ryan had expected when he'd seen her in passing over the past few weeks, with dark hair pulled into a low ponytail and the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. She wasn't flashy, no dramatic makeup, no power suit, just a simple charcoal blouse, dark jeans, and an expression that suggested she'd seen this exact scene play out 100 times before. Ryan straightened up, suddenly aware that he'd been caught in a moment of profound defeat by a woman he'd noticed but never actually spoken to. He gestured vaguely at the machine. "Trying to negotiate." "How's that going?" "Not well." Lena smiled, a small, genuine thing that reached her eyes, and walked over. She set her tablet on the counter, studied the machine for exactly 3 seconds, then reached behind it and flipped a switch Ryan hadn't known existed. The machine hummed to life. She pressed 2 buttons in sequence, and within seconds, a perfect shot of espresso poured into the cup Ryan had optimistically placed there 20 minutes ago. She handed it to him. "You either work magic," Ryan said, "or you've been through this before." "I've been through it longer," Lena replied, her smile turning slightly wry. "That machine breaks every other week. Facilities keep saying they'll replace it. Let me guess, they never do." "Never." Ryan took a sip of the espresso. It was good, better than it had any right to be. "I owe you," he said. "You don't." "I definitely do. You just saved me from a very dark place." Lena laughed, a soft, easy sound that made something in Ryan's chest loosen just slightly. "Well," she said, picking up her tablet, "glad I could help." She turned to leave, and Ryan, surprising himself, spoke up. "I'm Ryan, by the way." She paused, glanced back. "Lena." "Nice to meet you, Lena." "You too, Ryan." And then she was gone, footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving Ryan alone with his espresso and the strange, unexpected feeling that something had just shifted in his carefully managed, predictable life. Ryan didn't think much about it at first. He returned to his desk, finished the budget report his boss wanted, sent 3 follow-up emails, and left at 5:15 p.m. to pick up Emma from after-school care. They went home. He made spaghetti. She told him about a boy named Jacob who'd stolen her eraser and then cried when the teacher made him give it back. Ryan listened, nodding at appropriate intervals, and thought about nothing except getting through the evening routine. Bath. Pajamas. 2 chapters of The Magic Treehouse. Lights out by 8:30 p.m. Then silence. Ryan sat on the couch in his small apartment, staring at his phone, scrolling through nothing. This was his life. Structured, stable, safe, and lonely. He didn't let himself think that word often. Lonely felt self-indulgent when he had Emma, when he had a job and a roof and everything a person was supposed to need. But sometimes, in the quiet hours after his daughter fell asleep, the word crept in anyway. He thought about Lena, not in any significant way, just thought about her. The way she'd smiled, the ease in her voice, the fact that she'd fixed the coffee machine without making him feel stupid for not knowing how. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. Ryan had learned that lesson the hard way. His marriage had ended 2 years ago, though if Ryan was honest, it had been over long before the paperwork made it official. He and Sarah had met in college. 2 kids who thought love meant late-night conversations and shared playlists and the kind of passion that felt eternal when you were 22. They'd gotten married young, had Emma even younger, and spent the next 6 years slowly realizing they'd built a life on a foundation that couldn't hold the weight of reality. Sarah wasn't a bad person. Neither was Ryan. They were just wrong for each other. She wanted adventure, spontaneity, freedom. Ryan wanted stability, routine, a home that felt like a home. When Emma turned 5, Sarah sat him down and said very calmly, "I don't think I'm happy." Ryan had known what was coming. He'd felt it too. "Okay," he'd said, and that was that. Sarah moved to Portland 6 months later, chasing a job opportunity and a version of herself she thought she'd lost. She called Emma every Sunday, sent birthday presents, paid child support on time. She wasn't absent, just distant. Ryan had full custody. He didn't resent it. He loved his daughter more than anything in the world. But it was hard. Harder than anyone who wasn't living it could understand. So he'd built walls, routines, a life that didn't leave room for chaos or heartbreak or the kind of vulnerability that had cost him so much before. Romance wasn't part of the plan. Not now. Maybe not ever. Yeah. But life, Ryan was learning, didn't care much about plans. Over the next 2 weeks, he kept running into Lena. Not in any dramatic way, just small moments. She was in the elevator one morning when he rushed in, coffee in one hand and Emma's forgotten lunchbox in the other. She smiled and said, "Rough start?" "You have no idea," Ryan replied. Bolt me replied, and they rode 7 floors in companionable silence. A few days later, she was in the break room again, microwaving something that smelled vaguely like Thai food. Ryan was heating up leftovers, mac and cheese Emma had refused to finish the night before. "Gourmet lunch?" Lena asked, nodding at his Tupperware. "Only the finest," Ryan said, prepared by a very discerning 7-year-old. Lena's expression softened. "You have a daughter?" "Yeah, Emma." "That's a lovely name." "She's a lovely kid, most of the time." Lena laughed. "Most of the time is pretty good." They talked for a few minutes. Nothing deep, just the kind of small talk that fills the space between strangers becoming acquaintances. But Ryan noticed things. The way Lena listened, really listened. Not just waiting for her turn to speak, the way she asked follow-up questions, remembered details. The way she never seemed rushed, even when the microwave beeped and her lunch was ready. It felt easy, and that scared him. 3 weeks after the coffee machine incident, Ryan found himself in the break room again, this time by choice. It was late afternoon, that dead zone between meetings when the office felt like a ghost town. Ryan had finished his work early for once and didn't need to pick up Emma for another hour. So he made himself a cup of tea, something he almost never did, and sat by the window overlooking the city. Seattle stretched out below him, all glass and gray sky and the faint shimmer of Puget Sound in the distance. He'd lived here his whole life, but sometimes the city still felt like a stranger. Mind if I join you? Ryan turned. Lena stood a few feet away, holding her own cup of tea and wearing a soft, questioning smile. Not at all, Ryan said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat, settling in with the kind of ease that suggested she wasn't in a hurry either. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lena said, "You come here often." Ryan snorted. That might be the worst pickup line I've ever heard. Not a pickup line, Lena said, grinning. Genuine question. Fair enough. And no, not really. I'm usually running out the door to get Emma. How's she doing? Ryan blinked. You remember her name? Of course. Something warm and unfamiliar stirred in Ryan's chest. She's good, he said, currently obsessed with horses and convinced she's going to be a veterinarian when she grows up. That's a solid career choice, right? I told her she'd have to get through high school biology first, and she looked at me like I'd suggested something impossible. Lena laughed, and the sound filled the quiet room in a way that made Ryan realize how much he'd missed this. Just talking, connecting, sharing the small, stupid moments that made life bearable. They talked for 20 minutes, about work, about Seattle, about the ridiculousness of office culture and the mystery of why the building's HVAC system was always either Arctic or tropical with no in-between. And then, without planning it, Lena said, I've been in this city for almost 15 years now. Yeah, where were you before? Chicago. Grew up there. Moved out here for work and just stayed. Do you like it? Lena considered the question, her gaze drifting to the window. I do, she said finally. It feels like a place where you can actually build a life, not just survive, you know? Ryan knew exactly what she meant. What brought you here? He asked. A job, a bad relationship that needed distance. She smiled, but there was something guarded in it now. The usual reasons people start over. Ryan nodded. He understood that too. They fell into silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that felt like trust. Then Lena glanced at her watch and sighed. I should get back, she said, standing. Yeah, me too. But neither of them moved right away. Lena looked at him, her expression unreadable, and said, This was nice. It was, Ryan agreed. And then she left, and Ryan sat alone by the window, feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Swoon. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ryan lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about Lena, about the way she'd listened when he talked about his daughter, about the warmth in her voice, about how natural it had felt to just exist in the same space as her. And then he thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. He was a single father. His life was complicated. He didn't have time for romance, didn't have energy for the kind of vulnerability that came with letting someone in. And beyond that, Lena was older. He didn't know exactly how much older. She'd mentioned being in Seattle for 15 years, and Ryan had done the math in his head without meaning to. If she'd moved here in her late 20s, that would make her somewhere in her early 40s now. 8 years older than him. Maybe more. Did that matter? Ryan didn't know. He'd never dated someone significantly older, never thought about it. But lying there in the dark, he realized it didn't bother him the way he'd expected it might. If anything, it explained things. The steadiness, the patience, the way Lena seemed comfortable in her own skin in a way Ryan was still learning to be. But would it bother her? That question lodged itself in Ryan's mind and refused to leave. Over the following weeks, Ryan and Lena fell into a rhythm. Not intentionally, just naturally. They'd see each other in the break room, in the elevator, in the lobby on their way out. They'd talk, short conversations, nothing profound, but consistent. Lena asked about Emma's science project. Ryan asked about Lena's work. She was a project manager for a tech consulting firm on the 8th floor. They complained about Seattle traffic. They debated the best coffee shop within walking distance of the building. It was easy. Too easy. And Ryan started to realize he was looking forward to these moments more than he should. He caught himself scanning the break room when he walked in, hoping to see her. Felt a small, stupid disappointment when she wasn't there. found excuses to take the stairs instead of the elevator just in case he'd run into her on a different floor. It was ridiculous. He was 34 years old, not a teenager with a crush. But that's exactly what it felt like. One afternoon, Ryan was sitting in the break room alone when Lena walked in. She looked tired, more tired than usual, and there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested a long day. "Rough one?" Ryan asked. Lena sighed and dropped into the chair across from him. "Client meeting from hell," she said. 3 hours of explaining the same thing 17 different ways and still getting blank stares. Sounds brutal. It was. She rubbed her temples. "I need a vacation." "When's the last time you took one?" Lena paused, thinking. 2 years ago? Maybe 3? That's a crime. "Tell me about it." They sat in silence for a moment, and then Lena said, "What about you? When's the last time you did something just for you?" Ryan laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Define just for me." "Something that isn't work or parenting. Something fun." Ryan thought about it. He couldn't remember. "That's what I thought," Lena said gently. "It's not that simple when you have a kid." "I know, but you're allowed to exist as more than just a dad, Ryan." The words hit harder than Ryan expected. Because she was right. He'd spent the last 2 years building his entire identity around being Emma's father. It was safe. It was noble. It gave him purpose. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being Ryan. "You're right," he said quietly. Lena reached across the table and squeezed his hand, just once, brief and warm, and then pulled back. "You're doing great," she said. "I hope you know that." Ryan looked at her, at the sincerity in her eyes, and felt something crack open inside him. He was falling for her. He knew it, and he had no idea what to do about it. The shift happened on a random Tuesday in late April. Ryan and Lena were sitting in their usual spot by the window, coffee cooling between them, when the conversation turned personal in a way it hadn't before. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan said. "Sure." "How old are you?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold question." "You don't have to answer." "No, it's fine," she smiled. "I'm 42. Ryan nodded slowly, doing the math he'd already done a dozen times in his head. 8 years. She was 8 years older than him. Lena watched him carefully, and Ryan could see the wariness creeping into her expression, the same guarded look she sometimes got when conversations ventured too close to something real. "Does that bother you?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. "No," Ryan said honestly. "Really?" "Really?" Lena studied him for a long moment, searching for doubt or hesitation or the polite lie people told to avoid awkwardness. She didn't find any, because there wasn't any. Ryan didn't care that she was 42. If anything, he liked it. Liked the steadiness that came with experience. Liked the way she didn't play games or dance around what she meant. "Okay," Lena said finally, but there was still something uncertain in her voice. And Ryan realized, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that Lena wasn't just asking if the age gap bothered him. She was asking if it was going to stop him from seeing her as someone worth pursuing. The thought had never crossed his mind, but clearly it had crossed hers. That night, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about the conversation, about the way Lena had asked the question, about the vulnerability underneath her calm exterior. She thought the age gap was a problem. Not for him, for everyone else. Ryan understood that fear. He'd lived a version of it himself, the constant awareness that being a single father made him complicated, made him less appealing, made him someone people might admire from a distance but wouldn't actually want to get close to. He wondered how many times Lena had been made to feel like her age was a flaw. How many men had looked at her and seen only a number instead of a person. It made him angry, and it made him want to prove her wrong. The following week, Ryan made a decision. He was going to ask Lena out. Not casually, not as friends. On a real date. The thought terrified him. He hadn't been on a date in over 3 years. Hadn't even thought about dating. The idea of putting himself out there again, of risking rejection, of opening himself up to the possibility of getting hurt, felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and being asked to jump. But he was going to do it anyway, because Lena was worth it. He spent 2 days rehearsing what he'd say, running through scenarios in his head, trying to find the right words that wouldn't sound desperate or awkward or too intense. And then, on a Thursday afternoon when the break room was nearly empty and the rain tapped softly against the windows, Ryan found himself sitting across from Lena with no plan and no script. Just honesty. They'd been talking about nothing, work deadlines, weekend plans, the weather, when Ryan felt the words rising in his throat before he could stop them. "You know," he said, keeping his tone light, "one day I might actually take you on a real date." He meant it as a joke, a way to test the waters without diving in. But the moment the words left his mouth, he realized he didn't want them to be a joke. Lena's smile faded. Not in a bad way, just shifted. Became something more serious. She looked at him carefully, like she was trying to see past the casual tone to the truth underneath. "Ryan," she started. "I'm serious," he said, and his voice was steady now, certain. Lena set down her coffee cup, her hands folding in her lap. "Doesn't it bother you that I'm older?" she asked quietly. There it was, the question she'd been holding on to, the fear she couldn't quite shake. Ryan leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "No," he said. "It doesn't. People will talk. Let them. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Lena exhaled slowly, and for the first time since Ryan had known her, she looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. "Because I've done this before," she said. "Not exactly this, but close enough. And it didn't end well." Ryan waited. "I was in a relationship a few years ago," Lena continued, her voice soft. "He was younger. Not by much, 5 years. But it was enough. His friends made comments, his family made comments, and eventually he started making them too. Little jokes about how I was robbing the cradle or how he should trade me in for a newer model before it was too late." She laughed, but it was bitter. "I know he didn't mean it, but it hurt. And after a while I started wondering if he was right, if I was holding him back, if he'd be happier with someone his own age." "Lena, I'm not telling you this for sympathy," she said, cutting him off gently. "I'm telling you because I need you to understand. I don't want to be someone's midlife crisis. I don't want to be the woman you look back on in 10 years and regret." Ryan shook his head. "That's not what this is." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not him." The words came out harder than Ryan intended, but he didn't take them back. Lena looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. "I don't care what people think," Ryan said. "I stopped caring about that when I became a single dad and had to deal with every stranger's opinion about how I was raising my daughter. I care about what's real, and this," he gestured between them, "feels real to me." Lena's eyes glistened, and Ryan realized she was fighting tears. "I like you," he continued, softer now. "I like the way you listen. I like the way you make me laugh. I like that you remember my daughter's name and ask how she's doing. I like that you're steady and honest and don't play games. And yeah, you're older than me. But that's not a flaw, Lena. It's just a fact." Silence stretched between them. Rain continued to fall outside, and then Lena whispered, "I like you too." Ryan's heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Yeah? Yeah. So, dinner?" Lena smiled, a real smile, tentative but genuine. "Okay," she said. "One date." "One date," Ryan agreed. And just like that, everything changed. Ryan spent the next 3 days in a state of controlled panic. He had a date with Lena Brooks, an actual date, the kind with reservations and intentional conversation and the possibility of something real happening, the kind he hadn't been on since before Emma was born, back when he was young enough to think love was supposed to be easy. He stood in his bedroom on Friday evening, staring at his closet like it had personally offended him. Everything looked wrong, too casual, too formal, too much like a man who had no idea what he was doing. "Daddy, why are you making that face?" Ryan turned to find Emma standing in his doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit and wearing her favorite unicorn pajamas. She was supposed to be at his sister's house already, but Michelle had texted saying she'd be 15 minutes late. "What face?" Ryan asked. "The worried face. The one you make when you can't find my library book." Ryan laughed despite himself. I'm not worried. You look worried. I'm fine, sweetheart. Emma walked into the room and climbed onto his bed, settling cross-legged with her rabbit in her lap. She studied him with the unsettling perception that 7-year-olds sometimes possessed. Are you going somewhere? She asked. Just dinner with a friend. What friend? Ryan hesitated. He hadn't told Emma about Lena. Hadn't planned to, not yet. Not until he knew if this was actually going somewhere. But Emma was watching him with those wide, curious eyes, and lying felt wrong. Her name is Lena, Ryan said carefully. She works in my building. Is she nice? Very nice. Is she pretty? Ryan smiled. Yes. Emma considered this, her small face serious. Then she said, Are you nervous? A little bit? Why? Because I want her to have a good time. She will, Emma said with the absolute confidence of someone who had never experienced rejection. You're the best daddy ever. You'll be a good dinner friend, too. Something warm and aching expanded in Ryan's chest. He crossed the room and sat on the bed beside his daughter, pulling her into a hug. Thanks, Bug, he whispered into her hair. You're welcome, she said, squirming free after exactly 3 seconds. Can I have ice cream at Aunt Michelle's? Ask your aunt. She always says yes. Then why are you asking me? Emma grinned and jumped off the bed, running out of the room with her rabbit bouncing behind her. Ryan heard the front door open a moment later, Michelle arriving right on time despite her warning, and then his daughter's excited voice explaining that Daddy was going to dinner with a pretty lady named Lena. Ryan groaned and dropped his face into his hands. This was really happening. He settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that Emma's teacher had once complimented at a parent-teacher conference. It was the nicest thing he owned that didn't scream trying too hard. He looked at himself in the mirror, ran a hand through his hair, and tried to remember how to be someone other than Emma's dad. His phone buzzed. Lena. Still meeting at 7? Ryan. Absolutely. Lena. Good, I'm nervous. The confession made him smile. Somehow knowing she was nervous too made everything feel less terrifying. Ryan. Me too. Lena. We'll figure it out. Ryan stared at those 3 words for a long moment. Simple. Honest. Exactly what he needed to hear. He grabbed his keys and walked out the door before he could talk himself out of it. The restaurant was called Coastal, a small seafood place tucked into a quiet corner of Capitol Hill. Not fancy enough to feel like he was trying to impress her with money he didn't have, but nice enough to signal that he'd put thought into this. Ryan had asked his sister for recommendations, and Michelle had looked at him with barely concealed delight before rattling off 3 options. He'd chosen Coastal because the reviews mentioned intimate lighting and excellent halibut. He arrived 10 minutes early and immediately regretted it. Now he was just standing on the sidewalk like an idiot, checking his phone every 30 seconds, and trying not to look as anxious as he felt. A couple walked past him holding hands, and Ryan felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Not jealousy. More like longing. For the kind of easy affection that came with time and trust. Ryan. He turned, and there was Lena. She wore a simple navy dress that hit just below her knees and a light jacket against the Seattle evening chill. Her hair was down for the first time since he'd known her, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She looked beautiful. Not in a showy way, but in the kind of understated elegance that took Ryan's breath away. Hi, he said, and his voice came out rougher than intended. Hi, Lena replied, and she was smiling, but Ryan could see the tension in her shoulders, the same nervous energy he was feeling. They stood there for a moment, 2 adults who had somehow forgotten how to navigate the basic mechanics of a first date. Then Ryan said, You look amazing. Lena's smile softened. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. This old thing? Ryan gestured at his shirt, and Lena laughed, and just like that, the tension eased. Should we go in? She asked. Yeah, let's do this. The hostess seated them at a small table near the window where they could see the last rays of sunlight fading over the city. The restaurant was quiet, populated mostly by other couples speaking in low voices. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. It was intimate without being oppressive. Ryan suddenly felt wildly out of his depth. They ordered drinks, wine for Lena, beer for Ryan, and studied their menus in silence. Ryan read the same description of pan-seared salmon 3 times without absorbing a single word. When the server left with their orders, Lena folded her hands on the table and looked at him. "So," she said. "So," Ryan echoed. "This is weird, right?" Ryan exhaled, relieved. "So weird. I thought it was just me." "Definitely not just you." They both laughed, and the sound broke something open between them. The same ease they'd had in the break room filtered back in, tentative but real. "How was your day?" Lena asked. "Chaotic. Emma convinced me she needed a new backpack because hers was too babyish. We spent 45 minutes at Target debating the merits of different cartoon characters." "Who won?" "Some anime thing I'd never heard of. She was very passionate about it." Lena grinned. "She sounds like a force of nature." "She is. In the best way." Ryan paused. "What about you? How was your day?" "Long meeting with a client who kept insisting that their impossible deadline was somehow my fault." I smiled and nodded and mentally composed my resignation letter. "Are you actually going to resign?" "No, but it felt good to imagine." They talked through the appetizers, about work, about Seattle, about the absurdity of adult life and the small victories that made it bearable. The conversation flowed easily, and Ryan felt himself relaxing into it. This wasn't so different from their break room talks. Just dinner, just 2 people enjoying each other's company. Then Lena said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Ryan tensed slightly. "Sure." "What happened with Emma's mom?" It wasn't the question he'd expected, but it wasn't unfair either. If this was going to go anywhere, Lena deserved to know. Ryan took a sip of his beer, organizing his thoughts. "We got married too young," he said finally. "Sarah and I met in college. We were 21, thought we had everything figured out. Got married at 23, had Emma at 25. And somewhere around year 6, we realized we'd built our entire lives on who we thought we were instead of who we actually were." "That's honest," Lena said quietly. "It wasn't dramatic. No cheating, no big blowout. We just grew apart. She wanted freedom. I wanted stability. We tried to make it work for Emma's sake, but eventually we both realized staying together was worse than splitting up." "How long ago?" 2 years. Sarah moved to Portland. She's still involved, calls Emma every week, visits when she can. She's not a bad mom. We're just better apart than together." Lena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That takes a lot of maturity. Or just exhaustion," Ryan said with a wry smile. "Fighting takes energy we didn't have." "Still, a lot of people can't do what you did," Ryan shrugged. "I just wanted Emma to be okay. Everything else felt secondary." They fell into silence as their entrees arrived. Ryan had ordered the halibut. Lena had chosen the risotto. They ate slowly, and Ryan found himself watching the way Lena moved, the deliberate way she cut her food, the thoughtful pauses between bites. Everything about her felt intentional, grounded. "What about you?" Ryan asked. "You mentioned a bad relationship earlier. Want to talk about it, or is that off limits?" Lena set down her fork, considering. "It's not off limits," she said. "Just not my favorite topic." "We can talk about something else." "No, it's okay." She took a sip of wine. "His name was Mark. We dated for 3 years. I was 38. He was 33. At first it didn't matter, we were happy, but over time, little comments started adding up. His friends would joke about me being his cougar. His mom once asked if I was worried about not having kids before it was too late." Ryan winced. "Yeah," Lena said. "It was like death by 1,000 cuts. And Mark never defended me. He'd laugh it off, tell me I was being too sensitive. Eventually I started believing him. Started thinking maybe I was the problem." "You weren't. I know that now. But at the time," she shook her head, "when we broke up, he told me he wanted someone he could grow old with. As if I was already old and he was still young. Like 5 years made me ancient." Anger flared hot in Ryan's chest. "That's cruel." It was honest in a way. Cruel, but honest. Lena met his eyes. "That's why I asked if the age gap bothered you. I needed to know if this was going to turn into the same thing." Ryan reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture surprised them both, but he didn't pull back. "I'm not him," Ryan said firmly, "and I'm not going to turn into him. I don't care what people think. I care about you." Lena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat like that for a moment, hands linked across the table, the restaurant humming with quiet conversation around them. Then Lena pulled back gently, wiping at her eyes and laughing softly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to get emotional." "Don't apologize. I asked. Still, this is supposed to be a nice dinner, not a therapy session." "It can be both," Ryan said, and Lena smiled, a real, unguarded smile that made his heart stumble. They finished their meal talking about lighter things, favorite movies, worst jobs they'd ever had, the strange quirks of Seattle weather. Lena told a story about accidentally attending a competitive hot dog eating contest in college, and Ryan laughed so hard he nearly choked on his water. By the time dessert arrived, chocolate lava cake they agreed to split, Ryan realized he hadn't thought about work or Emma or any of his usual worries for over an hour. He'd just been present, here, with Lena. It felt like something he'd forgotten was possible. As they walked out of the restaurant into the cool Seattle night, Lena turned to him and said, "This was really nice." "It was," Ryan agreed. "I mean it. I wasn't sure. I didn't know if this would be awkward or forced, or if we'd realize the break room thing doesn't translate to the real world. But it does." "It does," Ryan echoed. They stood on the sidewalk, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain. Lena pulled her jacket tighter against the chill, and Ryan fought the urge to pull her close. Too soon. He didn't want to rush this. "Can I walk you to your car?" he asked instead. "That would be nice." They walked in comfortable silence, their footsteps synchronized without effort. When they reached Lena's car, a sensible silver sedan parked 2 blocks away, she turned to face him. "So," she said. "So," Ryan replied, echoing their earlier exchange. Lena smiled. "I'd like to do this again." Relief washed over him. "Yeah? Yeah. Next week?" "Next week sounds good." Ryan nodded, suddenly awkward again. He didn't know the protocol here. Did he kiss her? Hug her? Shake her hand like some kind of corporate weirdo? Lena solved the problem by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around him in a brief, warm hug. She smelled like vanilla and something floral he couldn't name. Ryan hugged her back, and for 3 perfect seconds, the world narrowed down to just the two of them. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Good night, Ryan." "Good night, Lena." He waited until she was in her car and pulling away before he walked back to his own. And the entire drive home, he couldn't stop smiling. The second date happened 5 days later at a coffee shop Lena loved in Fremont. It was less formal than the restaurant, just afternoon coffee on a Saturday while Emma was at a birthday party. They sat outside despite the October chill, wrapped in jackets and sharing a piece of carrot cake. The third date was a walk around Green Lake on a Sunday morning. Emma was with Sarah for the weekend, and Ryan felt strangely unmoored without his usual routine. Lena met him at the trailhead wearing sneakers and a windbreaker, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. They walked the loop slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Lena told him about growing up in Chicago, about her parents who still lived there and called every Sunday. Ryan told her about his sister Michelle, about how she'd basically saved his life after the divorce by showing up with casseroles and watching Emma so he could sleep. "She sounds amazing," Lena said. "She is. Annoyingly perfect, actually. Married to a great guy, 2 kids, runs her own business. I spent most of my 20s resenting her for having it all figured out. And now? Now I'm just grateful she exists." They stopped at a bench overlooking the water. A family of ducks paddled past, and Ryan found himself thinking about Emma, about how much she'd love this, about how strange it felt to be here without her. "You okay?" Lena asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" Ryan hesitated, then decided honesty was the only way forward. "About Emma. About how this affects her." Lena nodded slowly. "That's fair. I don't usually date. I mean, obviously, you're the first person I've been out with since the divorce. And I don't know the rules here. When do I introduce you? What do I say? How do I explain this without making it weird or scary for her?" You don't have to figure it all out right now, Lena said gently. I know, but I think about it anyway. Lena was quiet for a moment, watching the ducks. Then she said, Can I tell you something? Of course. I don't have kids. I never wanted them, honestly. And for a long time, I worried that made me selfish or broken or somehow less than other women. Mark used to make comments about it, how maybe I'd change my mind when my biological clock started ticking. Like not wanting kids was just a phase I'd grow out of. Ryan felt the familiar anger at Mark rising again, but he stayed silent. But the truth is, Lena continued, I just never felt that pull. I love my life. I love my work. I love having time to read and travel and be spontaneous, and I'm not going to apologize for that anymore. You shouldn't have to, Ryan said. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I like you, Ryan. I really like you. But I'm not looking to be Emma's mom. I don't want to replace Sarah or compete with her. If this goes somewhere, and I hope it does, I'd be happy to be a part of Emma's life in whatever way makes sense, but I need you to know that I'm not built for full-time motherhood. I don't have that in me. Ryan absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. He appreciated the honesty, appreciated that Lena was setting boundaries instead of pretending to be something she wasn't. I respect that, he said finally, and I'm not asking you to be her mom. Emma has a mom. What I'm asking is, if this works out, are you okay with her being part of my life? Part of our life? Lena smiled. Absolutely. Okay then. Okay. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lake, and Ryan felt something settle in his chest, a rightness he hadn't expected. This could work. The fourth date was dinner at Ryan's apartment. It was Lena's idea. I want to see where you live, she'd said. I want to see your life. Ryan had panicked slightly. His apartment was small and cluttered with Emma's art projects and toys that never quite made it back to the toy box. It wasn't impressive. It was just home. But Lena had insisted, so Ryan spent an entire Saturday cleaning while Emma was at a friend's house. He vacuumed, did dishes, hid the truly embarrassing clutter, and attempted to make his place look like an adult lived there. When Lena arrived, she looked around with genuine interest. She studied Emma's drawings on the fridge, smiled at the photos on the bookshelf, ran her fingers along the spines of Ryan's books. This is nice, she said. It feels like you. Messy and barely holding it together, Lena laughed. Warm, real, lived in. Ryan cooked pasta, nothing fancy, just spaghetti with marinara and garlic bread, and they ate at his small kitchen table. It was intimate in a way the restaurant hadn't been. Domestic, like they were trying on a version of the future to see if it fit. After dinner, they moved to the couch. Ryan put on music, something jazz and instrumental that filled the silence without demanding attention. They talked for hours, about books they'd loved as kids, about movies that made them cry, about fears and hopes, and the strange weight of being an adult. And somewhere around midnight, when the conversation had lulled into comfortable quiet, Lena shifted closer on the couch. Ryan's arm was draped across the back of the cushions, and she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. Ryan held his breath. This was the closest they'd been, the most physical contact beyond brief hugs. Is this okay? Lena asked softly. Yeah, Ryan said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. This is very okay. They sat like that, wrapped in the quiet intimacy of his living room, and Ryan felt something fundamental shift. This wasn't just dating anymore. This was real. When Lena left that night, she kissed him. It was soft and brief, just a gentle press of lips on the doorstep, but it sent electricity through Ryan's entire body. Good night, she whispered. Good night, Ryan managed, and when he closed the door behind her, he leaned against it and smiled like an idiot for 5 full minutes. By the 6th date, Ryan knew he needed to tell Emma. Not in a dramatic way, just honestly. He waited until a quiet Sunday morning when they were making pancakes together. Emma stood on a stool beside him, carefully measuring flour with the intense concentration of a surgeon. Bug, can I talk to you about something? Ryan asked. Emma looked up, suspicious. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. Okay. She dumped the flour into the bowl with only minimal spillage. What is it? Remember I told you about my friend Lena? The pretty lady. Right. Well, we've been spending time together, going to dinner, talking, and I really like her. Emma processed this information while stirring the batter with more enthusiasm than technique. Do you love her? She asked. The question caught Ryan off guard. I I don't know yet. Maybe. It's too soon to say. But you might? I might. Emma nodded seriously, then said, Is she nice to you? Very nice. Does she make you happy? She does. Then that's good. Emma looked up at him with those wide, wise eyes. You should be happy, Daddy. Ryan felt his throat tighten. He crouched down so they were eye level. You know you're the most important person in my life, right? No matter what happens with Lena or anyone else, you come first, always. Emma threw her flower-covered arms around his neck. I know, Daddy, but you can have other important people too. That's allowed. Ryan hugged his daughter, marveling at how someone so small could be so emotionally intelligent. When can I meet her? Emma asked, pulling back. When you're ready, no rush. I'm ready now, Ryan laughed. Let me talk to Lena first, okay? We'll figure out the right time. Okay. Emma returned to the pancakes. Can we make chocolate chip ones? Absolutely. And just like that, the conversation was over. Emma had accepted Lena into their lives with the easy grace of childhood, and Ryan felt another piece of his worry dissolve. 2 weeks later, they planned the introduction. Nothing formal. Just lunch at a family-friendly restaurant in Ballard. Low pressure, easy escape routes if things got weird. Ryan was more nervous than he'd been on any of the actual dates. Emma, meanwhile, was treating it like a grand adventure. She'd insisted on wearing her favorite dress, purple with sparkles, and had spent 20 minutes brushing her hair until it was perfect. They arrived at the restaurant first. Ryan spotted Lena through the window, walking toward them with a small gift bag in her hands. Is that her? Emma whispered loudly. That's her, Ryan confirmed. She's really pretty. I told you. Lena walked in and Ryan introduced them. Emma, this is Lena. Lena, this is Emma. Emma. Lena crouched down to Emma's level. Not in a condescending way, but in the way of someone who understood that first impressions mattered. Hi, Emma, she said warmly. Your dad talks about you all the time. He does? Emma looked delighted. All the time. I hear you're an amazing artist. I like drawing horses. Horses are great. I brought you something. Lena held out the gift bag. Emma looked at Ryan for permission. He nodded, and she opened it carefully. Inside was a sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. Emma's eyes went wide. For your horse drawings, Lena explained. I thought you might like it. I love it. Emma hugged the sketchbook to her chest. Thank you. And just like that, Lena won his daughter's heart. Lunch was easy. Emma chattered about school and her friends and the science project she was working on. Lena listened attentively, asked questions, laughed at Emma's jokes. She didn't try too hard or pretend to be something she wasn't. She was just herself. And Emma loved her. After lunch, they walked through a nearby park. Emma ran ahead, exploring, while Ryan and Lena walked side by side. That went well, Ryan said. She's wonderful, Lena replied. You've done an amazing job with her. Thanks. I'm trying. Lena slipped her hand into his. It was the first time they'd held hands in public, and Ryan felt simultaneously self-conscious and elated. So where do we go from here? Lena asked. Ryan thought about it, about the past 2 months, about how natural this had all felt, about how Lena had seamlessly become part of his life without disrupting it. Forward, he said simply. Lena smiled and squeezed his hand. Forward sounds good. Forward turned out to be more complicated than Ryan had anticipated. Not because of Lena, not because of Emma, but because the world had opinions, and those opinions arrived uninvited like unwanted dinner guests who refused to leave. It started small. Subtle glances in the break room when Ryan and Lena sat together. Raised eyebrows from coworkers who'd noticed they arrived at work in the same car one morning after Lena had stayed over. Nothing overt. Just the kind of low-level scrutiny that made Ryan's skin prickle with awareness. He tried to ignore it, told himself it didn't matter what other people thought. But then his sister Michelle came over for dinner one Thursday night, took one look at Lena helping Emma with homework at the kitchen table, and pulled Ryan aside in the hallway. "She's older than you," Michelle said. Not a question, a statement. Ryan crossed his arms. "So?" "So nothing. I'm just observing. You're judging." "I'm not judging." Michelle's expression softened. "I'm just surprised. You didn't mention it. Because it doesn't matter." "Clearly it does, or you wouldn't be so defensive." Ryan exhaled slowly, forcing himself to unclench his jaw. Michelle wasn't being malicious, she was being protective. It was how she showed love, even when it felt like interference. "She's 42, Ryan said quietly. "I'm 34, 8 years. And before you say anything, yes, I know. I've done the math. I've thought about it. And I don't care." Michelle studied him for a long moment, then glanced back toward the kitchen where Lena was patiently explaining fractions to a very confused Emma. "Does Emma like her?" Michelle asked. "Emma loves her." "And you?" Ryan met his sister's eyes. "Yeah, I love her too." The words surprised him as much as they surprised Michelle. He hadn't said them out loud before, hadn't even fully admitted them to himself. But standing there in the hallway, watching Lena laugh at something Emma said, Ryan knew it was true. He loved her. Michelle's expression shifted from concern to something warmer. She reached out and squeezed his arm. "Then that's all that matters," she said. "But Ryan, you need to be prepared. People are going to talk. They're going to make assumptions. Some of them are going to be cruel." "I know." "And you're okay with that?" Ryan thought about Lena, about the way she'd looked when she talked about Mark and his family's comments, about the fear in her eyes when she'd asked if the age gap bothered him. "I'm okay with protecting her from it," Ryan said firmly. Michelle smiled. "Good answer." They returned to the kitchen, and the evening continued without incident. But Ryan couldn't shake the conversation, couldn't shake the awareness that what felt natural and right between him and Lena would be filtered through the judgment of everyone around them. The first real confrontation came 2 weeks later at a company happy hour. Ryan normally avoided these events. They were loud and awkward and full of forced networking that made him want to retreat into a corner with his phone. But Lena had asked him to come, said it would be nice to spend time together outside of work hours in a casual setting, so he'd agreed. They arrived separately, maintaining the professional distance they'd tacitly agreed upon in the office. But within an hour, Ryan found himself standing beside Lena at the bar, their shoulders touching, their conversation easy and warm. That's when Derek from accounting appeared. Derek was in his late 20s, aggressively confident in the way of men who'd never been told no, and he'd been trying to get Lena's attention for months. Ryan had noticed. Everyone had noticed. "Lena," Derek said, sliding into the space beside her with a grin that was all teeth. "Looking good tonight." "Thanks, Derek," Lena said politely, her tone pleasant but distant. Derek's gaze shifted to Ryan, and something calculating flickered across his face. "You two seem friendly," he said. "We work in the same building," Lena replied smoothly. "Lots of people here are friendly." "Right, sure." Derek took a sip of his beer, his eyes moving between them. "I just noticed you've been spending a lot of time together lately. Coffee breaks, lunch. The other day I saw you both leaving in the same car." Ryan felt tension coil in his shoulders. Beside him, Lena went very still. "Is there a point to this observation?" she asked, and her voice was ice. Derek shrugged, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "No point. Just interesting, that's all. I mean, you could be his mom." The words landed like a slap. Ryan's vision went red. He opened his mouth to say something that would probably get him fired, but Lena's hand closed around his wrist, firm and grounding. "We're done here, Derek," she said quietly. "Hey, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Derek continued, emboldened by alcohol and his own stupidity. "It's a little weird, right? A woman your age with a guy like him? What are you, like 45? "I'm 42, Lena said, her voice steady, but Ryan could feel the tremor in her hand. "And my personal life is none of your business." Sure, I'm just looking out for Ryan here. Wouldn't want him to get tangled up in some cougar situation, you know?" Ryan pulled his wrist free from Lena's grip and stepped forward, placing himself between her and Derek. "Let me be very clear," Ryan said, his voice low and dangerous. You don't get to talk about her like that. You don't get to make comments about her age or our relationship or anything else. And if I hear you've said anything like this again to anyone, we're going to have a very different conversation." Derek's smirk faltered. "Dude, relax. It's just a joke. It's not funny." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Derek raised his hands in mock surrender and backed away, disappearing into the crowd with a muttered comment Ryan couldn't quite hear. Ryan turned to Lena. She was pale, her jaw tight, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," Ryan said immediately. "I should have—" "I need some air," Lena interrupted softly. She walked toward the exit before Ryan could respond. He followed, pushing through the crowd of coworkers until they were outside in the cool night air. Lena stood on the sidewalk, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. "Lena, he's right, you know," she said quietly. "What? No, he's an idiot. He's saying what everyone's thinking. I could be your mother. That's what people see when they look at us." "I don't care what people see." "But I do!" The words came out sharp, pained. Lena turned to face him, and tears were streaming down her face now. "I care because I've lived this before, Ryan. I've been the woman people whisper about, the one they make jokes about. And I told myself I wouldn't do it again. I told myself I was done being someone's embarrassment." "You're not my embarrassment," Ryan said fiercely. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in years." "Then why does it feel like we're constantly defending this? Why does every interaction feel like we're waiting for someone to say something cruel?" Ryan didn't have an answer. Because she was right. They were constantly bracing for judgment, constantly aware of the scrutiny. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Because people are small-minded and scared of anything that doesn't fit their narrow view of how life should work," he said. "Because Derek is a bitter asshole who can't stand seeing someone else happy. Because the world is full of people who will always find something to criticize." "That's not comforting." "I know, but here's what is." Ryan squeezed her hands. "I love you. I'm in love with you. And I don't give a damn what anyone else thinks about it." Lena went very still. "You love me?" Ryan realized what he'd just said. He hadn't planned this moment, hadn't rehearsed the words, but they were true, and there was no taking them back. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Fresh tears spilled down Lena's cheeks, but she was smiling now. "I love you too," she whispered. Ryan pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, her face buried in his chest. They stood like that on the sidewalk outside the bar, wrapped in each other while the city hummed around them. "I'm scared," Lena admitted, her voice muffled. "Me too." "What if it doesn't work?" "What if it does?" She pulled back to look at him, and Ryan brushed tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "I can't promise it'll be easy," he said. "I can't promise people won't say stupid things or make us feel like we have to defend ourselves, but I can promise I'll be here. I can promise I'll choose you every single time." Lena searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. She found none. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay." They didn't go back to the happy hour. They went to Ryan's apartment instead, stopping to pick up Emma from Michelle's on the way. Emma chattered about her evening with her cousins, oblivious to the tension radiating from the adults, and Ryan felt grateful for her innocence. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ryan and Lena sat on the couch in the dim light of the living room. Lena had changed into one of Ryan's old t-shirts, and her hair was damp from the shower. She looked younger without makeup, more vulnerable. "I need to tell you something," Lena said quietly. Ryan tensed. "Okay." "When I was with Mark, toward the end, I started believing what people said about me. That I was too old, that I was selfish for not wanting kids, that I was holding him back from some better, younger version of life." She paused. "I convinced myself that being alone was better than being someone's compromise." "You're not my compromise," Ryan said. "I know. Logically, I know that. But sometimes the fear creeps in anyway. Sometimes I hear Derek's voice or Mark's voice or my ex-mother-in-law's voice, and I start wondering if they're right. If I'm being selfish by being with you, if I'm stealing time you could spend finding someone your own age who wants to give you more kids, and a traditional family, and all the things I can't offer." Ryan took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you?" he asked. Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. I see someone who's honest, who doesn't play games or pretend to be something she's not. I see someone who makes me laugh and challenges me and treats my daughter with genuine kindness. I see someone who's lived enough life to know what matters and what doesn't. I see the person I want to build a future with. Even if that future looks different than you imagined. Especially then. Lena leaned into him and Ryan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. I don't need more kids, he said softly. I have Emma, and she's more than enough. I don't need some fantasy of what a relationship should look like. I just need this. You and me and whatever we build together. What if people don't accept us? Then they don't accept us. But we accept us. That's what matters. They sat in silence for a long time, just holding each other. And slowly Ryan felt Lena's breathing even out, felt the tension drain from her body. Thank you, she whispered eventually. For what? For choosing me. Ryan kissed the top of her head. Every time. The next few months tested that promise in ways Ryan hadn't anticipated. Derek's comments spread through the office like wildfire. Within a week, everyone knew Ryan and Lena were together. The whispers started immediately. Some people were supportive, offering quiet congratulations. Others were less kind. Ryan heard the word cougar muttered behind his back more than once. Heard speculation about Lena's motives, about whether she was using him for something. Heard one particularly vicious rumor that she was only with him because her biological clock was ticking and she was desperate for a ready-made family. That one had made Ryan so angry he'd nearly confronted the person who started it. Lena had stopped him. It's not worth it, she'd said. People will believe what they want to believe. But Ryan could see the toll it was taking on her, the way she withdrew slightly in public spaces, the way she second-guessed affectionate gestures at work, the way she built walls around herself to protect against the judgment. It killed him to watch. Then Sarah got involved. Ryan's ex-wife had been largely absent from the drama of his dating life, content to co-parent from a distance and stay out of his personal business. But when Emma mentioned Lena during one of their weekly phone calls, Sarah's curiosity had been piqued. She called Ryan the next day. Emma says you're seeing someone, Sarah said without preamble. I am, Ryan confirmed. Someone older? Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. Where's this going, Sarah? I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm just concerned about Emma. She's getting attached to this woman, and I want to make sure it's serious. It's serious. How much older? Ryan closed his eyes. 8 years. Silence on the other end of the line. Then Sarah said carefully, That's significant. Is it? You're dating someone 15 years older than you. That's different. How is it different? Because James and I aren't introducing him to Emma as a parental figure. Neither are we. Lena is very clear that she's not trying to replace you. But she's in Emma's life. She's at your apartment. Emma talks about her constantly. That's significant, Ryan. Ryan took a deep breath, trying to keep his temper in check. Sarah wasn't being unreasonable. As Emma's mother, she had every right to be concerned about the people in their daughter's life. Lena is important to me, Ryan said evenly. I love her, and she's been nothing but kind and respectful to Emma. She's not overstepping. She's not trying to be her mother. She's just there, present, supportive. And what happens when it ends? Sarah asked. What happens when Emma loses another person she cares about? The question hit Ryan hard because he'd asked himself the same thing 100 times. It's not going to end, he said. But even to his own ears, the words sounded uncertain. You can't know that. No, I can't. But I can't live my life assuming everything good will fall apart. That's not fair to me, and it's not fair to Emma. She needs to see that relationships can work, that people can choose each other and stay. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. But if this goes south, Ryan, if Emma gets hurt, she won't. I promise. After they hung up, Ryan sat in his car outside the office building and let his head fall back against the seat. Doubt crept in, insidious and unwelcome. What if Sarah was right? What if he was being selfish by bringing Lena into Emma's life? What if the relationship didn't last and Emma was the one who paid the price? His phone buzzed. Lena. Everything okay? You've been quiet today. Ryan stared at the message, then typed back. Ryan, can we talk tonight? Lena, of course. My place or yours? Ryan, yours. He needed to see her, needed to talk through the fear and doubt before it consumed him. That evening, Ryan dropped Emma at Michelle's and drove to Lena's apartment in Queen Anne. She'd moved there 2 years ago after her breakup with Mark, and it was exactly what Ryan expected. Clean lines, minimal clutter, books everywhere, and a view of the Space Needle that probably cost more in rent than Ryan wanted to think about. Lena opened the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back, her face free of makeup. She looked tired. Hey, she said softly. Hey. She stepped aside to let him in, and Ryan walked to the window, staring out at the city lights without really seeing them. What's wrong? Lena asked, coming up beside him. Ryan told her about the conversation with Sarah, about the doubts that had been creeping in, about the fear that he was being selfish by pursuing this relationship when Emma's well-being hung in the balance. Lena listened without interrupting, her expression carefully neutral. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Do you want to break up? Ryan's head snapped around. What? No. Because it sounds like you're trying to talk yourself into it. I'm not. I'm just scared. Of what? Of messing this up. Of hurting Emma. Of proving everyone right who said this wouldn't work. Lena nodded slowly, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked small suddenly, fragile in a way Ryan had never seen. I'm scared too, she admitted. Every single day. I wake up wondering if today's the day you'll realize this is too hard, that I'm too much work, that finding someone easier would make more sense. That's not what I want. Then what do you want, Ryan? The question hung in the air between them. Ryan stepped closer, taking Lena's face in his hands. I want you, he said firmly. I want this. I want us to stop letting other people's fear dictate how we live our lives. Sarah has a point, though. What if Emma gets hurt? Emma is tougher than we give her credit for, and she deserves to see what a healthy relationship looks like. She deserves to see two people who love each other choosing to stay even when it's hard. Lena's eyes filled with tears. You really believe that? I really believe that. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. I love you, she whispered. Even when I'm terrified, even when it feels like the whole world is against us, I love you. I love you too, Ryan said. And I'm not going anywhere. They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync. Then Lena pulled back and wiped her eyes, a shaky laugh escaping. We're a mess, she said. The best kind of mess. She smiled and some of the tension drained from the room. They spent the rest of the evening on her couch, wrapped in blankets and each other, not talking about the future or the past or anyone's opinions, just existing together in the present moment. And for the first time in weeks, Ryan felt the fear loosen its grip. The breakthrough came in December, 3 months after Derek's comments at the happy hour. Ryan's company was having its annual holiday party, a formal affair at a hotel downtown with dinner and dancing and the kind of forced festivity that made Ryan want to hide in a corner. But Lena had asked if he'd be her date, and he'd agreed because saying yes to her was becoming automatic. Emma was staying with Sarah for the weekend, so Ryan had no excuse to leave early. He picked Lena up at her apartment, and when she opened the door, his breath caught. She wore a dark green dress that hugged her curves, her hair styled in soft waves, her makeup subtle but perfect. She looked stunning. Wow, Ryan said. Lena smiled, a hint of self-consciousness in her expression. Too much? Not even close, you look incredible. You clean up pretty well yourself. Ryan had rented a suit for the occasion, something he almost never did, and he felt ridiculously overdressed. But the way Lena was looking at him made it worth it. They arrived at the party fashionably late. The ballroom was already full of Ryan's coworkers and their partners, all dressed up and making small talk over cocktails. Christmas lights twinkled from every surface, and a jazz band played in the corner. Ryan took Lena's hand as they walked in, a deliberate gesture of solidarity. Let people talk. Let them stare. He was done hiding. They found their table and sat with a group from Lena's department. The conversation was easy, the people kind. No one made comments about their age difference. No one treated them like a spectacle. It felt normal. After dinner, the dancing started. Ryan wasn't much of a dancer, but when Lena held out her hand with a questioning smile, he couldn't say no. They moved on to the dance floor and Ryan pulled her close. The song was slow, something classic and romantic, and they swayed together in the dim light. "This is nice," Lena murmured against his shoulder. "It is. I was nervous about tonight, worried people would stare. Some of them probably are. I know, but I don't care as much anymore." Ryan pulled back to look at her. "Yeah?" Lena nodded. "I've spent so much of my life worrying about what other people think, trying to make myself smaller or quieter or more acceptable. But being with you has reminded me that I don't have to do that I can take up space and be loved exactly as I am." Ryan's throat tightened with emotion. "You can," he said. "You are." They continued to dance, lost in their own world, while the party swirled around them. And when the song ended and they returned to their table, Ryan made a decision. He'd been carrying the ring in his jacket pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. He'd bought it on impulse after seeing it in a vintage jewelry store window, a simple platinum band with a small diamond that reminded him of Lena. Elegant, understated, timeless. He hadn't planned to propose tonight. Hadn't even been sure he was ready. But watching Lena laugh with his coworkers, watching her glow with confidence and joy, Ryan knew there would never be a more right moment than this. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Lena looked up, concerned. "You okay?" "Yeah. Can you come with me for a second?" She followed him out of the ballroom and into the quiet hotel hallway. Christmas decorations hung from the ceiling, casting soft golden light over the empty corridor. "What's going on?" Lena asked. Ryan reached into his pocket, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I had this whole speech planned," he said, "about timing and certainty and all the reasons this makes sense. But standing here with you, none of that feels important anymore." He pulled out the ring box and dropped to one knee. Lena's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes going wide. "I love you," Ryan said simply. "I love your strength and your honesty and the way you make me want to be braver. I love that you don't try to be someone you're not. I love that you see me, really see me, not just as Emma's dad, but as Ryan, as a person with hopes and fears and dreams of my own." Tears were streaming down Lena's face now. "I don't care what anyone else thinks about us," Ryan continued. "I don't care about the age difference or the whispers or the judgment. All I care about is building a life with you. So, Lena Brooks, will you marry me?" For a moment, Lena just stood there, crying and shaking her head in disbelief. Then she dropped to her knees in front of him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, and then they were kissing, laughing, crying all at once in the empty hallway while the party continued without them. When they finally pulled apart, Lena looked down at the ring, turning her hand to catch the light. "It's perfect," she said. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You're perfect." "I'm really not." "Perfect for me, then." Ryan pulled her close again, and they sat there on the floor of the hotel hallway, wrapped in each other and the promise of everything to come. They returned to the ballroom holding hands, Lena's ring catching the Christmas lights like captured starlight. Ryan felt like he was walking on air, untethered from gravity and every doubt that had weighed him down for months. The announcement spread through the party faster than Ryan expected. He'd barely pulled out Lena's chair before someone noticed the ring and gasped. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered around their table, offering congratulations and hugs, and the kind of genuine warmth that made Ryan's earlier fears feel foolish. Most people were happy for them, genuinely, sincerely happy. But not everyone. Ryan spotted Derek across the room, his expression sour as he watched the celebration. Their eyes met briefly, and Derek raised his glass in a mocking salute before turning away. Ryan felt a flash of anger, but Lena's hand tightened around his, grounding him. "Ignore him," she whispered. "I'm trying." "Try harder. This is our night." She was right. Ryan forced himself to focus on the people who mattered. on his coworkers, who were thrilled for them, on Lena's friends from her department who were already planning a bridal shower, on the moment itself, bright and real and perfect. They stayed until midnight, dancing and laughing and accepting congratulations. When they finally left, stepping out into the crisp December air, Ryan felt lighter than he had in years. "We're engaged," Lena said, the words sounding like wonder. "We're engaged," Ryan echoed. She stopped on the sidewalk, pulling him close and kissing him deeply. When they broke apart, she was smiling so wide it looked like it might hurt. "I want to tell Emma," she said. "Is that okay? I know she's with Sarah this weekend, but I want her to know. I want her to be part of this." Ryan's chest swelled with something he couldn't quite name. Love, yes, but also gratitude. Gratitude that Lena understood how important Emma was to him, how central she needed to be to any future they built. "We'll tell her together," Ryan said. "Tomorrow, when I pick her up." "Tomorrow," Lena agreed. That night they went back to Lena's apartment and stayed up until 3 in the morning, making plans and dreaming out loud about what their life would look like, where they'd live, what kind of wedding they wanted, how they'd blend their lives together without losing the pieces that made them individuals. Ryan had never felt more certain of anything. The next afternoon, Ryan drove to Sarah's house in Portland to pick up Emma. The drive took 3 hours, giving him plenty of time to rehearse what he'd say, how he'd explain the engagement in a way that wouldn't scare Emma or make her feel like her world was being turned upside down. He needn't have worried. Emma came running out of Sarah's house the moment she saw his car, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She launched herself into his arms, chattering about the movie she'd watched and the pancakes Sarah's boyfriend James had made for breakfast. Ryan held his daughter tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Daddy, you're squishing me," Emma protested, squirming. "Sorry, Bug, I missed you." "I missed you too. Can we get burgers on the way home?" "Absolutely." Sarah appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. She looked tired but content, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. James hovered behind her, a tall man with kind eyes who'd been nothing but decent to Ryan since he and Sarah had started dating. "Hey," Sarah said. "Hey, thanks for watching her." "Of course." Sarah's gaze dropped to Ryan's left hand, then back to his face. "Emma told me you had a big party last night." Ryan realized Emma must have seen his text to Sarah about being late picking her up. His daughter was nothing if not observant. "Yeah, company holiday thing." Sarah studied him for a moment, and Ryan saw the question forming in her eyes. She knew him well enough to recognize when something had changed. "Can we talk for a second?" she asked. Ryan glanced at Emma, who was already climbing into the car and buckling her seatbelt. "Sure." They walked a few steps away from the house, out of Emma's earshot. Sarah shoved her hands in her pockets and looked at him with something like concern. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Happy, really happy. It's been a while since I've seen you look like that." Ryan felt a smile tug at his lips despite himself. "I asked Lena to marry me last night." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "That was fast." "Not really. We've been together almost 6 months. Still, that's a big step." "I know, but it feels right." Sarah nodded slowly, processing. Then she said, "How does Emma feel about it?" "I'm telling her today, on the drive home." "And if she's not okay with it?" The question caught Ryan off guard. He'd been so focused on how to tell Emma that he hadn't seriously considered the possibility she might not be supportive. "Then we'll talk about it," Ryan said carefully. "We'll work through it together." "But you're not calling off the engagement." "No." Sarah's expression was unreadable. Then she sighed and reached out, squeezing his arm. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said, "for Emma's sake." "I do." "Okay." Sarah dropped her hand and stepped back. "Well, congratulations, I mean that. You deserve to be happy." The words felt genuine, and Ryan realized with some surprise that he believed her. Whatever had broken between them, Sarah didn't wish him ill. She just wanted their daughter protected. "Thanks," Ryan said. "That means a lot." They said their goodbyes, and Ryan climbed into the car where Emma was already fiddling with the radio. He pulled out of Sarah's driveway and headed back toward Seattle, his heart hammering against his ribs. They were 20 minutes into the drive when Emma asked, "Daddy, is something wrong?" "No, Bug. Nothing's wrong." "Why?" "You keep looking at me in the mirror. You do that when you're nervous." Ryan couldn't help but laugh. His daughter was too perceptive for her own good. "You're right," he admitted. "I am a little nervous." "About what?" Ryan took a deep breath. "Remember how I told you Lena and I have been spending a lot of time together?" Huh? "Well, last night I asked her to marry me, and she said yes." Silence from the back seat. Ryan glanced in the rearview mirror. Emma was staring out the window, her expression thoughtful. "Does that mean she'll be my stepmom?" Emma asked finally. "Kind of, but she won't try to replace your mom. She just wants to be part of our family." "Will we all live together?" "Eventually, yes. We'll find a place that works for all of us." Emma processed this, chewing on her bottom lip the way she did when she was thinking hard about something. "Will she be nice to me?" she asked, and her voice was small. Ryan's heart broke a little. "She already is nice to you, Bug. That won't change." "But what if it does? What if she's only nice now because she wants you to like her, and then later she's mean?" Ryan carefully pulled the car over to the shoulder of the highway and put it in park. He turned in his seat to face his daughter. "Come here," he said. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed into the front seat, settling in his lap despite being too big for it. Ryan wrapped his arms around her. "I need you to listen to me, okay?" he said gently. "Lena is a good person. She's not going to be mean to you, but if you ever feel uncomfortable or if something doesn't feel right, I need you to tell me. Your feelings matter, Emma. Always. Even if it makes you sad? Even then. You come first. You will always come first." Emma buried her face in his shoulder, and Ryan felt her small body relax against him. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? I like Lena. She's nice, and she gave me that sketchbook, remember?" "I remember." "And you're happy with her. I can tell." Ryan pulled back to look at his daughter's face. "Yeah, Bug. I'm really happy with her." Emma considered this, then nodded decisively. "Then I'm happy too." Relief flooded through Ryan so intensely it made him dizzy. He hugged Emma tight, blinking back unexpected tears. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome. Can we get burgers now? I'm starving." Ryan laughed and helped Emma back into her seat. As he pulled back onto the highway, he caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "Hey, Emma." "Yeah? I love you. You know that, right?" "I know, Daddy. I love you too." They got burgers and milkshakes, and Emma spent the rest of the drive planning what she wanted to wear to the wedding. By the time they reached Seattle, Ryan's nerves had settled into something like peace. Lena was waiting at Ryan's apartment when they arrived. She'd let herself in with the key he'd given her last month, and the smell of homemade cookies filled the space. Emma's face lit up when she saw her. "Lena, Daddy said you're getting married." Lena knelt down to Emma's level, her expression nervous but hopeful. "He told you?" "Yeah, can I be a flower girl?" The tension drained from Lena's shoulders, replaced by visible relief. "I would love that, if it's okay with your dad and your mom." "Mom will say yes. She always says yes to the fun stuff." Lena laughed and pulled Emma into a hug. Over Emma's shoulder, she met Ryan's eyes, and the gratitude and love he saw there made his chest ache. This was his family now, imperfect and unconventional and absolutely right. The months that followed were a blur of wedding planning and logistics. Ryan and Lena decided on a small ceremony in April, just family and close friends. Nothing fancy or expensive, just honest and real. Finding a place to live together proved more complicated than Ryan anticipated. Lena's apartment was too small for 3 people, and Ryan's was cramped even for 2. They needed something bigger, but affordable housing in Seattle felt like a myth. They spent weekends driving around neighborhoods, touring apartments and small houses. Emma came with them sometimes, offering opinions on which places had the best kitchens or the coolest views. Ryan loved watching her and Lena together, the easy way they'd started to interact. Lena never tried too hard, never forced affection. She just existed alongside Emma with steady warmth. They found a place in Greenwood in February, a small 3-bedroom house with a backyard and enough space for Emma to have her own room and Lena to have a home office. The rent was higher than Ryan wanted, but combining their incomes made it manageable. Moving day was chaos. Michelle showed up with her husband and kids to help, along with several of Lena's friends from work. Emma designated herself the official snack coordinator, handing out granola bars and juice boxes with the seriousness of someone managing a military operation. By evening, the house was full of boxes and furniture in various states of assembly. Ryan stood in what would be their bedroom, staring at the disaster, and felt Emma slip her hand into his. "It looks like a tornado happened," she observed. "It kind of does." "But it's our tornado." Ryan smiled down at his daughter. "Yeah, Bug. It's our tornado." Lena appeared in the doorway carrying a pizza box, her hair escaping from its ponytail and dirt smudged on her cheek. "Dinner's here," she announced. "I couldn't find plates, so we're eating out of the box like barbarians." "I love it," Emma declared, grabbing the box and running toward the kitchen. Ryan crossed the room and pulled Lena into his arms. She melted against him with a tired sigh. "This is insane," she muttered. "Completely." "Why did we think this was a good idea? Because we're optimists?" Lena laughed against his chest. "We're idiots." "That too." They stood like that for a moment, wrapped in each other while chaos swirled around them. Then Emma's voice echoed from downstairs. "Are you guys coming? The pizza's getting cold." "We're coming," Ryan called back. They ate pizza on the floor of their new living room, surrounded by boxes and exhausted friends. Michelle regaled them with horror stories from her own moving experiences. Emma got sauce on her shirt and didn't care. Lena leaned against Ryan's shoulder and fell asleep sitting up. It was perfect in its imperfection. The wedding approached faster than Ryan expected. One minute it was March and they were addressing invitations, and the next it was mid-April and he was standing in his sister's bathroom staring at himself in a suit while Michelle fussed with his tie. "You look terrified," Michelle observed. "I'm not terrified." "You look terrified." Ryan met his sister's eyes in the mirror. "What if I mess this up?" "You won't." "You don't know that." "I know you. I know how you love. You don't mess up the things that matter to you." Ryan swallowed hard against the emotion rising in his throat. Michelle squeezed his shoulder. "Lena is lucky to have you," she said. "But more importantly, you're lucky to have her. Don't forget that." "I won't." "Good. Now let's get you married before you pass out from anxiety." The ceremony was held in a small garden venue on the outskirts of the city. 40 guests sat in white chairs arranged in neat rows, and string lights hung from the trees even though it was still light out. Emma stood at the front in her flower girl dress, clutching a basket of petals and taking her role very seriously. Ryan waited at the altar with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. His best friend from college stood beside him as best man, offering a steady presence. The officiant smiled at him encouragingly. Then the music started and Lena appeared. She wore a simple ivory dress that flowed to her ankles, her hair loose around her shoulders. No veil, no excessive decoration, just Lena, beautiful and real, and walking toward him with tears already streaming down her face. Ryan's breath caught. She reached the altar, and he took her hands, barely aware of anyone else in the garden. "Hi," Lena whispered. "Hi," Ryan managed. The officiant began speaking, but Ryan only half heard the words. He was too focused on Lena's face. On the way, she was looking at him like he'd hung the moon, on the knowledge that in a few minutes she would be his wife. When it came time for vows, Ryan pulled out the crumpled piece of paper he'd written and rewritten a dozen times. "Lena," he started, his voice shaking. "6 months ago, you fixed a broken coffee machine and handed me a cup that I desperately needed. You didn't know it then, but you were also handing me a second chance at happiness." Lena's tears fell faster. "I'm not good at speeches," Ryan continued. "I'm not particularly romantic or smooth with words, but I can promise you this. I will choose you every single day, when things are easy and when they're hard, when people celebrate us and when they judge us. I will show up. I will be honest. I will love you exactly as you are, not who I think you should be." He paused, looking down at their joined hands. "You make me braver," he said quietly. "You make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be that man." Lena was openly crying now. She wiped at her eyes with her free hand, laughing through the tears. "I didn't write mine down," she admitted, "because I knew I'd cry too hard to read it anyway." Gentle laughter rippled through the guests. "Ryan," Lena said, her voice thick with emotion. You saw me when I'd convinced myself I was invisible. You chose me when I'd decided I was too old or too complicated or too much for anyone to want. You loved me not despite my age, but because of everything my life has taught me. She squeezed his hands. I promise to love your daughter like she's part of my heart, because she is. I promise to build a home with you that feels safe and honest and full of laughter. I promise to be patient when you're scared and strong when you need support. I promise to choose you, Ryan Parker, every single day for the rest of my life. The officiant declared them married, and Ryan didn't wait for permission to kiss her. He pulled Lena close and kissed her with everything he had while their friends and family cheered. Emma ran up and wrapped her arms around both of them, and they stood there as a family for the first time, complete and whole. The reception was small and intimate, held in the same garden. They ate dinner and danced and cut a cake that Emma had helped pick out. Ryan's father, who'd flown in from Arizona, gave a toast that made everyone cry. Lena's parents, quiet and reserved throughout most of the day, pulled Ryan aside and told him they'd never seen their daughter so happy. As the evening wound down and the sun set over the garden, Ryan found himself standing at the edge of the dance floor watching Lena teach Emma some complicated dance move that involved a lot of spinning. Michelle appeared beside him, holding a glass of wine. You did good, little brother, she said. Thanks. I mean it. I was worried at first, I'll admit it. The age thing, the timing, Emma's adjustment. But watching you three together, she shook her head. You built something real. Ryan looked at his sister. It wasn't easy. The best things never are. No, Ryan agreed, but it was worth it. Michelle clinked her glass against his beer bottle. To worth it, then. To worth it. Later that night, after the guests had left and Emma had fallen asleep in the car on the way home, Ryan and Lena stood in their bedroom surrounded by the detritus of the wedding day. Lena's dress hung on the closet door. Ryan's suit jacket was draped over a chair. Emma was tucked into bed down the hall, still wearing her flower girl dress because she'd refused to change. Ryan pulled Lena close, swaying gently even though there was no music. We're married, Lena said wonderingly. We're married, Ryan confirmed. Mrs. Parker. You don't have to change your name if you don't want to. I know, but I think I want to. She looked up at him. Is that okay? More than okay. They stood in silence, holding each other. Then Lena said quietly, Thank you. For what? For not giving up. For fighting for us when it would have been easier to walk away. Ryan kissed her forehead. There was never a version of this where I walked away. I'm glad. Me too. They climbed into bed still wearing half their wedding clothes, too exhausted to do more than curl into each other. Ryan listened to Lena's breathing even out as she fell asleep, and he thought about how far they'd come, how many obstacles they'd overcome, how many times they'd chosen each other despite the doubt and fear and judgment. It hadn't been easy. But Michelle was right. The best things never were. And this? His wife sleeping in his arms, his daughter safe down the hall, this life they'd built together, was the best thing Ryan had ever known. Marriage, Ryan discovered, was both easier and harder than he'd expected. Easier because coming home to Lena every night felt natural, like she'd always been there. Harder because blending two independent lives into one required constant negotiation and compromise in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. Lena liked the house cold at night. Ryan liked it warm. Lena was meticulously organized. Ryan was comfortable with a certain level of chaos. She woke at 5:30 every morning to exercise. He hit snooze 3 times and stumbled to the coffee maker half asleep. They figured it out. Extra blankets on Ryan's side of the bed, designated spaces for Lena's organization and Ryan's clutter. Coffee ready when Ryan woke up because Lena had already been up for an hour. The real adjustment came with Emma. Not because Emma didn't love Lena, she did. She'd started calling Lena by her first name with the occasional stepmom Lena, thrown in when she was feeling particularly affectionate. But navigating the boundaries of parenting when one parent was biological and one was by choice required delicate balance. The first real conflict happened 3 months after the wedding. Emma had left her homework until Sunday night again, and Ryan was frustrated. Not angry, just tired of having the same conversation every week about responsibility and time management. He'd sent Emma to her room to finish the assignment, and she'd gone with tears and dramatic sighs. Lena had watched from the kitchen, clearly wanting to say something but holding back. "What?" Ryan asked when Emma's door slammed upstairs. "Nothing." "Lena." She set down the dish she'd been washing and turned to face him. "I just think you were a little harsh." Ryan felt his shoulders tense. "She does this every week. We talk about it. She promises to do better, and then Sunday night comes and she's crying over math homework she's had since Monday. She's 8 years old. 8-year-olds aren't great with time management. I know that, but she needs to learn. Maybe she needs help more than she needs a lecture." The words stung more than Ryan expected. He crossed his arms, defensive. "I'm not lecturing her. I'm teaching her responsibility." "By sending her to her room upset? What would you have me do? Let her skip homework and face consequences at school instead?" "No, I just think—" Lena paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think maybe we could have helped her with a schedule earlier in the week instead of waiting until it became a crisis." The "we" hit Ryan sideways. Because Lena was right, they were a family now. Emma's struggles were their struggles. But hearing Lena criticize his parenting, even gently, felt like an attack on the one thing he'd been doing alone for years. "I've been handling Emma's homework just fine on my own," Ryan said, his voice colder than he intended. Lena's expression shuddered. "Right. Of course. I'm not a real parent. I should stay out of it." "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" They stared at each other across the kitchen, the air thick with unspoken hurt. Finally, Lena said quietly, "I'm going to take a walk." She grabbed her jacket and left before Ryan could respond. Ryan stood alone in the kitchen, anger and guilt warring in his chest. He knew he'd handled that badly, knew he'd hurt Lena by drawing a line between her role and his. But the defensive part of him insisted he was right. Emma was his daughter. He'd been making these decisions for 8 years. What right did Lena have to question him now? Upstairs, Emma's door opened. She appeared at the top of the stairs, tears streaking her face. "Did Lena leave because of me?" she asked, her voice small. Ryan's heart cracked. "No, Bug. She just went for a walk." "But you were fighting. I heard you." "We weren't fighting. We were just talking." It sounded like fighting. Ryan climbed the stairs and sat down beside Emma on the top step. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes adults disagree," Ryan said carefully. "That doesn't mean we're fighting or that anyone's in trouble. It just means we're figuring things out." "Did you disagree about my homework?" Ryan sighed. "Kind of." "Is Lena mad at me?" "No, not at all. She loves you." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She's not wrong, you know." Ryan looked down at his daughter. "About what?" "About helping me earlier. I get confused with the homework, and I don't want to bother you because you're always busy or tired. So I wait until the last minute, and then I panic." The words hit Ryan like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on teaching Emma responsibility that he hadn't seen she was struggling, that she needed support, not lectures. "Bug, you're never a bother," Ryan said, his voice rough. "Never. If you need help, you tell me, anytime, okay?" Emma nodded against his shoulder. They sat like that for a while, father and daughter on the stairs, until Ryan heard the front door open. Lena appeared at the bottom of the staircase, her cheeks pink from the cold. She looked up at them, uncertain. "I'm sorry," Ryan said immediately. "You were right. I was harsh, and I should have asked for your help instead of shutting you out." Lena climbed the stairs slowly and sat down on Emma's other side. "I'm sorry too," she said. "I shouldn't have criticized your parenting. You're an amazing dad, and Emma's lucky to have you." "But you're part of this family," Ryan said firmly. "Your opinion matters. Your help matters. I need to remember that." Emma looked between them, then announced, "I think we should do homework together from now on, like as a family thing. That way, nobody has to be stressed." Lena and Ryan exchanged glances over Emma's head. "That's actually a great idea," Lena said. "Really great," Ryan agreed. Emma beamed, clearly pleased with herself for solving the adult problem. They established a new routine after that. Every Wednesday and Sunday evening, they sat at the kitchen table together. Emma worked on homework while Ryan and Lena handled their own work, budget planning, emails, whatever needed attention. They were just together, available for questions and support without the pressure of last-minute panic. It worked better than Ryan could have imagined. But the real test came 5 months after the wedding when Lena sat Ryan down one evening after Emma had gone to bed and said, "I need to tell you something." Ryan's stomach dropped. The serious tone, the careful way she was holding herself, it triggered every abandonment fear he'd tried to bury. "Okay," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Lena took a deep breath. "I'm late." Ryan blinked. "Late for what?" "My period. I'm late. 3 weeks late." The words didn't compute at first. Ryan stared at her, his brain struggling to process. "But you said you didn't want kids," he said finally. "I didn't. I don't. I mean," Lena pressed her hands to her face. "I don't know what I mean. This wasn't supposed to happen. We're careful." "Not that careful, apparently." The joke fell flat. Lena looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "I took a test this morning," she said. "It was positive. I took 3 more. All positive." Ryan sat back, the information finally sinking in. Lena was pregnant. His wife, who had explicitly said she didn't want children, who had made peace with that choice, who he'd married understanding that Emma was enough, was pregnant. "How do you feel?" Ryan asked carefully. "Terrified. Confused. Like my entire life just got turned upside down." Lena's voice cracked. "I'm 43 years old, Ryan. I'm not supposed to be having babies at 43. I don't even know if I can handle this. What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I resent the baby for taking away the life I built? What if—" Ryan pulled her into his arms, cutting off the spiral of fear. She collapsed against him, shaking. "It's okay," he said, even though he had no idea if that was true. "We'll figure this out. I don't want you to think I trapped you or planned this, or—" "I don't think that, not for a second." Lena pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "What if I can't do this?" Ryan took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Then we don't do it," he said firmly. "This is your body, Lena. Your choice. Whatever you decide, I support you, completely." "But what do you want?" Ryan thought about it, really thought about it. He already had Emma. He'd never planned on more children. His life was full and complicated enough. But the idea of a baby with Lena, their baby, sent a surge of unexpected joy through him. "I want whatever you want," he said honestly. "If you want to have this baby, I'm all in. If you don't, I'm all in for that too. There's no wrong answer here." Lena searched his face, looking for doubt or resentment. She found none. "I need time to think," she whispered. "Take all the time you need." They sat on the couch for hours, wrapped in each other and the weight of this unexpected decision. Lena cried. Ryan held her. They talked in circles about logistics and fears and the future they'd planned versus the future that was suddenly possible. Finally, as dawn started to break outside their windows, Lena said, "I think I want to keep it." Ryan's heart kicked against his ribs. "Yeah? I'm terrified. I have no idea how to be a mother. But the thought of not doing this, of not having this baby, feels worse than the fear." "Then we're having a baby." Lena laughed through fresh tears. "We're having a baby." Holy shit. Holy shit. They told Emma 2 weeks later, after the first doctor's appointment confirmed everything was progressing normally. Ryan was worried about how she'd react, whether she'd feel displaced or jealous. He shouldn't have been. Emma's eyes went wide when they explained she was going to be a big sister. Then she let out a shriek of pure joy and launched herself at Lena, hugging her so hard they both nearly toppled over. "Can I help name the baby?" Emma demanded. "Absolutely," Lena said, laughing. "And can I teach it stuff, like how to draw and read and play?" "All of that." "This is the best thing ever." Ryan watched his daughter bounce around the living room, already planning the baby's nursery and making lists of things she needed to teach her new sibling, and felt something settle in his chest. This was going to work. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Lena was sick for the first 4 months, exhausted for most of the rest. She struggled with the physical changes to her body, with the loss of independence, with the fear that she was too old and too unprepared for this. Ryan did his best to support her. He took over more of the household responsibilities. He held her hair when she was sick. He rubbed her feet when they swelled. He told her she was beautiful when she felt like a whale. Emma helped too, in her own way. She drew pictures for the baby and talked to Lena's growing belly every night before bed. She helped set up the nursery, carefully organizing tiny clothes and blankets. She took her role as big sister more seriously than anything Ryan had ever seen. The judgment from the outside world was complicated. Some people were thrilled. Michelle threw a baby shower that made Lena cry happy tears. Ryan's coworkers offered congratulations and hand-me-down baby gear. But others couldn't hide their disapproval. Ryan heard whispers about Lena's age, about the risks of pregnancy after 40, about how selfish it was to have a baby when you were that old. One particularly vicious comment came from a woman in Lena's office who said within Lena's hearing, "I just think it's irresponsible. She's going to be 60 when that kid graduates high school, practically a grandmother." Lena came home that day in tears, and Ryan held her while she sobbed about being a terrible mother before the baby was even born. "You're not terrible," Ryan said firmly. "You're human, and that woman is a judgmental asshole who doesn't know anything about our life." "But what if she's right? What if I'm too old for this?" "My mom was 41 when she had Michelle. Michelle turned out pretty great. That was different." "How?" Lena didn't have an answer. Ryan tilted her face up to look at him. "Age doesn't determine whether you're a good parent. Love does, patience does. Showing up every day, even when it's hard, does. And you have all of that in abundance." "I'm so scared," Lena whispered. "Me too. But we're scared together. That counts for something." The baby came 6 weeks early on a cold November evening. Lena's water broke while they were having dinner, and suddenly everything was chaos. Ryan called Michelle to come get Emma while he rushed Lena to the hospital. She was calm despite the fear in her eyes, breathing through contractions with the same focused determination she brought to everything. The labor was fast and intense. "Too fast for an epidural," the nurses said apologetically. Lena gripped Ryan's hand so hard he lost feeling in his fingers, but he didn't let go. "I can't do this," she gasped between contractions. "You can," Ryan said. "You're the strongest person I know." "I'm not strong. I'm terrified." "You can be both." At 11:47 p.m., their daughter was born. She was tiny, barely 5 pounds, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire maternity ward. The nurses whisked her away for a moment to check her breathing and wait, and Ryan watched Lena's face transform from exhausted terror to pure, overwhelming love. When they placed the baby in Lena's arms, she started crying. "Hi," Lena whispered to their daughter. "Hi, little one. I'm your mom." Ryan felt his own tears spill over. He leaned down and kissed Lena's forehead, then gently touched their daughter's tiny hand. She gripped his finger with surprising strength. "She's perfect," Ryan said. "She's so small. She's strong, like her mom." They named her Claire Elizabeth Parker. Claire, because Lena's grandmother had been named Clara and Elizabeth after Ryan's mother. Emma arrived at the hospital the next morning and stood beside the bed staring at her baby sister with awe. "She's so tiny," Emma breathed. "Very tiny," Lena agreed. "Can I hold her?" Lena looked at Ryan, who nodded. They carefully positioned Emma on the bed and placed Claire in her arms, supporting the baby's head. Emma stared down at Claire with an expression of fierce protectiveness. "I'm your big sister," she said solemnly, "and I'm going to teach you everything I know. How to draw horses and read chapter books and stand up to mean kids. I'm going to be the best big sister ever." Ryan took a photo of the three of them, Lena exhausted but glowing, Emma serious and determined, Claire sleeping peacefully, and knew he'd treasure it forever. The first few months with Claire were brutal. She was colicky and didn't sleep longer than 2 hours at a stretch. Lena was recovering from birth and struggling with postpartum anxiety. Ryan was running on fumes, trying to balance work and Emma's needs and supporting Lena and caring for a newborn. There were nights when Ryan sat in the nursery at 3 a.m., rocking a screaming Claire and wondering if they'd made a terrible mistake. Nights when Lena sobbed from exhaustion and fear that she was failing. Nights when Emma crawled into their bed because she felt left out and scared her parents didn't love her anymore. But there were also moments of unexpected grace. Emma singing to Claire when nothing else would calm her. Lena laughing deliriously when Claire spit up all over Ryan's work shirt right before an important meeting. The first time Claire smiled, really smiled, at Lena, and the way Lena's entire face transformed with joy. They survived on coffee and takeout and the support of Michelle, who showed up with meals and babysitting and the kind of practical help that kept them from completely falling apart. "It gets easier," Michelle promised one afternoon when she found Ryan staring blankly at the mountain of laundry in the living room. "When?" Ryan asked. "Eventually, I promise." She was right. Around 4 months, Claire started sleeping longer stretches. Around 6 months, her colic finally resolved, and she became a happy, smiley baby who adored her big sister. Around 8 months, Ryan woke up one morning and realized they'd hit a rhythm. It wasn't perfect. Nothing with 2 kids ever was, but it was manageable. Lena flourished as a mother in ways that surprised them both. She'd been so convinced she didn't have maternal instincts, but with Claire she was patient and attentive and endlessly creative. She sang silly songs and made funny faces and somehow always knew what Claire needed. "I think you were wrong," Ryan told her one Sunday morning as they watched Claire and Emma play on the living room floor. "About what?" "About not being built for motherhood." Lena smiled, leaning into his shoulder. "Maybe I just needed the right reason." Emma turned 8 that year, and they threw her a birthday party in the backyard of their little house. Friends from school came. Sarah drove up from Portland with James. Michelle brought her kids. Even Lena's parents flew in from Chicago. Ryan stood at the edge of the chaos, children running wild, adults chatting, Emma opening presents while Claire babbled happily in Lena's arms, and felt something he'd spent years searching for. Contentment. Not perfect happiness. Not the absence of problems. Just the deep settled peace of knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Sarah found him by the grill, watching Emma show off her new art supplies to a friend. "She's happy," Sarah observed. "She is." "You did good, Ryan. This life you built for her, for all of you, it's really good." "Thanks. That means a lot coming from you." Sarah smiled. "I was wrong, you know. When you first told me about Lena, I was worried and judgmental and I thought you were making a mistake." "I remember. I'm sorry for that. Looking at you two, at this family, there's no mistake here. Just love." Ryan felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, there is." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd loved each other once and now loved their daughter enough to build separate but supportive lives. "She's going to be a great big sister," Sarah said, nodding at Emma. "She already is." That evening, after the guests had left and the kids were finally asleep, Ryan and Lena collapsed on the couch. The house was a disaster of wrapping paper and cake crumbs and abandoned party favors. "We should clean," Lena said without moving. "We absolutely should," Ryan agreed, also not moving. They sat in the wreckage of the party, too tired to do anything but exist side by side. "Ryan?" Lena said after a while. "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. For choosing me. For building this life with me even when everyone said we were crazy." Ryan took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Best decision I ever made," he said simply. "Even with all the chaos? The sleepless nights? The judgment? Especially because of all that. Easy doesn't mean better, Lena. We fought for this. We earned it. That makes it worth more." Lena rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you." "I love you too." They fell asleep on the couch like that, hands linked, surrounded by the evidence of their messy, imperfect, beautiful life. Years passed. Emma grew into a confident, creative teenager who still drew horses but now also wrote poetry and played guitar. Claire became a force of nature, stubborn and funny and absolutely fearless. The age gap between Ryan and Lena stopped mattering to everyone except the occasional stranger who made assumptions they politely ignored. They had hard days, fights about money and parenting and whose turn it was to handle the latest crisis. Times when Ryan's fear of abandonment flared up and he withdrew. Times when Lena's anxiety convinced her she was failing everyone. But they had more good days than bad. Sunday morning pancakes with both girls, family movie nights where they argued over what to watch. Emma teaching Claire to draw, Claire following Emma around like a devoted shadow, Lena and Ryan stealing quiet moments together when the chaos subsided. One evening, when Emma was 15 and Claire was 6, Ryan came home from work to find Lena sitting at the kitchen table staring at her laptop with an odd expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing's wrong. I just got an email from the building manager at my old office." "Okay?" "They're finally replacing the coffee machine, the one from the break room, after all these years." Ryan felt a smile tug at his lips. He crossed the room and looked over Lena's shoulder at the email announcing the upgrade. "The end of an era," he said. "Remember when I fixed it for you, that first day we really talked? I remember thinking you were the most competent person I'd ever met." Lena laughed. "I was just a woman who dealt with that stupid machine 100 times. You were my future wife, I just didn't know it yet." Lena turned in her chair, pulling Ryan down for a kiss. "Everything started with that coffee machine," she said when they broke apart. "No," Ryan corrected gently. "Everything started with you seeing someone who needed help and choosing to help them. Everything started with kindness and a broken espresso machine. And that." They smiled at each other, and Ryan thought about that afternoon years ago, about the tired single father standing in a break room, defeated by a malfunctioning machine, about the woman who'd stepped forward with quiet confidence and changed his entire life. He thought about all the people who'd said it wouldn't work, about Derek's cruel comments and Sarah's concerns, and the strangers who'd whispered about the age gap, about his own fears and Lena's doubts, and the 1,000 reasons they could have given up. And he thought about what they'd built instead. 2 daughters who were loved and secure, a home full of laughter and art and the comfortable chaos of family, a partnership built on honesty and patience and the daily choice to keep choosing each other. "Doesn't it bother you that I'm older?" Lena had asked him once, voice trembling with fear. It never had, not when she'd asked the question, not when Derek had made his comments, not when people stared or whispered or made assumptions, not when Claire was born and people did the math on Lena's age, not when Emma became a teenager and sometimes introduced Lena as her stepmom with a slight defensive edge, ready to protect their family from judgment. Not ever. Because what they had wasn't about age. It was about 2 people who'd been brave enough to build something real, who'd chosen love over fear, who'd fought for their family when it would have been easier to walk away. Emma came thundering down the stairs, Claire trailing behind her. "Mom, can we order pizza? I'm starving and I have too much homework to wait for actual cooking." Lena laughed. "Sure, Bug. Ryan, you okay with pizza?" "Always." They gathered around the kitchen table, Ryan and Lena and Emma and Claire, and debated toppings with the kind of passionate intensity unique to their family. Emma wanted pepperoni. Claire insisted on pineapple. Lena lobbied for vegetables. Ryan suggested they get 2 pizzas and avoid the argument entirely. They ended up with 3. While they waited for delivery, Claire climbed into Ryan's lap and Emma helped Lena with her chemistry homework. Music played from someone's phone. The house smelled like the vanilla candles Lena loved. Outside, the Seattle rain tapped against the windows. It was ordinary, and it was everything. Ryan looked around at his family, his wife who'd once been too scared to believe she deserved this, his oldest daughter who'd accepted change with grace, his youngest who'd arrived unexpectedly and completed them, and felt gratitude so profound it ached. This was the life he'd built, imperfect and messy and absolutely real, and he wouldn't change a single thing.